Hi everybody, this is Keith Casey. I'm at PHP Tech 2009 and I am with...
Paul Jones with OmniTI.
So Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do, stuff like that.
So I'm a web architect at OmniTI. I've been there for a couple of years. I manage a team of web developers. We work on client stuff, we work on our own internal stuff as well. One of the things that we're regularly tasked with doing is seeing how well people's either the frameworks or the applications, how well they perform under stress.
Okay, so what, I mean, your obvious claim to fame and activity in this community seems to be centered around benchmarking. Can you give us maybe a tip or two to help people get started with benchmarking?
Sure. So first we need to realize that benchmarking is not really the same thing as profiling. Profiling lets you look at how individual pieces of the code are running and how well they're running. Benchmarking tests how well the application runs, how well it performs from end to end. So you can think of benchmarking as sort of a micro thing, or you can think of profiling as sort of a micro thing, and benchmarking as a macro thing. The easiest way to get started is to get a copy of either AB, which is Apache Benchmark, or preferably the Siege tool from JoeDog Software. You can quickly learn how to use that. All that stuff is online. And the idea is that you then set up, if you can, a completely separate server with your application or your framework or whatever it is you're trying to test. Set that up in its normal production setup, and then test that separate server by running Siege or AB against it. And essentially what you're doing is you are emulating, you're pretending as if you're getting 10 different users or 100 different users all at the same time, hitting that application, and then seeing how well that application performs.
But you wouldn't use benchmarking to diagnose database issues or something like that?
You wouldn't necessarily. In fact, that's one of the problems. You have to figure out. So benchmarking tells you how well you're running from end to end. So let's say you got 100 requests per second. If that's not as good as you want it to be, you would then need to use a profiling tool to figure out where the slow parts of the code are, and then try and improve those, and then go back and do the benchmarking again to see how good the effects were after having improved just that one section of the code.
So you use benchmarking to sort of get a baseline on the performance, diagnose that maybe there is a problem, and then you'd use a profiler to
find
actually...
exactly where the problem is. That's exactly right.
And then you have the baseline to compare against.
That's also exactly right.
Okay, great.
Which means that benchmarking can be used as an engineering analysis tool. The idea is that if you know you've got a certain performance level, then you make changes. You can then retest a second performance level against the first one and see if the changes that you made overall had an impact on how well the application is performing, and if it was better or worse. And if it's worse, then you need to figure out, were those changes that I made really worth that trade-off?
Okay. Well, for people just starting off on benchmarking, they might want to dive into it, figure out what's going on. What are some gotchas that you might want to look out for?
So all the gotchas boil down to what are called controlling for variation. You want to make sure that when you're benchmarking, that you're benchmarking just the application or the framework or whatever that is, and that you're not being hampered by differences in how fast the database responds, differences in how fast the file system responds, differences in how fast the network is responding, things like that. One of the things in particular that I ran into was, let's say you've got an application that uses a session. If you're using file-based sessions and you're hitting that application with essentially 10 users simultaneously over the course of a minute, you're going to see in the first minute you'll get, say, 400 requests per second. In the second minute you'll get 200. In the third minute you'll get 100. But nothing. Doesn't look like anything has changed. Well, the reason for that is because each of those 10 users over the course of that minute represents a new session. The file system is now filling up with these new session files. And because the application has to spend time looking that up, after a while you've got 32,000 or 64,000 session files, and so the application is being dragged down by the file system operation. So the way around that is to just force the session ID to be the same every time. Then you're actually testing the application itself and not being hampered by these additional sessions that are coming into it that you didn't really notice to begin with.
So it's all about
file system.
So it's all about minimizing the variables that you're actually testing.
That's exactly right. Minimizing variation. That's exactly right.
So Paul, if we wanted to learn a little bit more about maybe some of your work and profiling in general, where would we go?
You can go to my blog at paul-m-jones.com, or you can go to Google and look for, I believe it's Web Framework Benchmarks, and I believe my blog and the framework benchmarking project that I've got at Google Code are all going to be on the first page.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're signing off from PHP Tech 2009.